Hello? Hi.
You will remember when you need to know. Ed is a technician in his mid-40s at a high-tech firm in Massachusetts, married to Lynn, a writer with whom he shares an interest in science and technology. One day in the summer of 1989, Ed and Lynn were walking along the Marginal Way in Ogunquit, Maine, a cliffside path that weaves along the rocky shore for several miles. Suddenly, Ed found himself becoming tense, moody, and withdrawn. He then became sweaty and worried and grabbed Lynn's hand tightly. He had no idea what his distress was about. Ed was practicing meditation and believes that this may have contributed to his eventual recovery of important material. Ed has also had a number of frightening childhood experiences which could be abduction-related. These will be discussed in the context of his hypnosis or relaxation session. From early childhood, Ed was unusually fearful of doctors' offices and operations. Anything to do with medicine, even before his tonsillectomy at about age 9. One day at the seashore, a week or so after the walk in Ogunquit, following a day of relaxation, he says, "It came to me." Ed began to recall an experience from the summer of 1961 when he was in high school. Over the next few months, more details came to his mind through what he called flashbacks. Ed had had some interest in what he calls alien intelligence. As a result of his memories, he became interested in the UFO phenomenon and attended a MUFON, the citizen-based mutual UFO network conference in New Hampshire. Several people he met through this network suggested he contact me, and so he telephoned my office in July 1992. Since then, I have interviewed Ed and Lynn for several hours and have conducted a hypnosis or relaxation session with him with the aim of recovering more information about his high school experience. He and Lynn have also been attending my support group. Ed's case is important for two principal reasons. First, the timing of his teenage experience and his recall of it suggest a process of information reception, storage, recovery, and integration of great purpose and potential power. Second, the narrative which Ed was able to recover in an altered state of consciousness appears, from what we know of the abduction phenomenon, to be much more plausible than the account he could provide from conscious memory. This supports the argument for the power of hypnosis to recover memories of abductions that are both meaningful and true to the actual experience, whatever the source of these experiences may ultimately prove to be, and suggests that, at least in the case of UFO abductions, hypnosis may be more of a clarifying than a distorting tool. In what follows, I will first tell the story of young Ed's abduction experience as he remembered it in our initial meeting on July 23, 1992. I will then bring in the rich details that he recovered in hypnosis on October 8th, which he feels give meaning and greater coherence to his experiences and subsequent life. Ed also has less clear recollections of earlier childhood visitations. In July 1961, Ed, his friend Bob Baxter, and Bob's parents took a trip up the coast of Maine in the Baxters' Nash. One damp and foggy night, they stopped at a place where the shore was rocky. Ed does not recall exactly where except that it was north of Portland. The Baxters stayed in a cabin while the boys slept nearby in the Nash, which had fold-down seats in the back. The car was parked perhaps 100 yards from the sea. Ed and Bob had been talking about how horny they were and speculated about the great encounters we were going to have at the beach. Ed believes he had been asleep when, the next thing I know, I'm out on this precipice, in a pod that had some sort of a glass bubble over it. He reported being naked in a small room with transparent curved walls. The room felt warm and safe, but Ed could see the pounding surf and hear the wind buffeting around outside. He believes he could hear strains of melodious light classical music coming perhaps from houses nearby. There is no question in Ed's mind that this really happened, although he calls the experience beyond language. With Ed in the pod was a small, slight female figure with long, straight, thin, silvery blonde hair. Although Ed could recall no specific earlier abduction experiences, the figure had familiar aspects to her, and he had vague, very sinister memories of something out there from his childhood. The female entity had a small mouth and nose, intense large dark eyes, and a sort of triangular-shaped head with a largish forehead. I had this uncomfortable feeling that every time she looked at me, she could just see right into me. He found her attractively unusual and felt a little self-conscious. The figure, perhaps sensing this, gave me some sort of blanket or big towel or something. She seemed to sense his thoughts without his saying anything, reassuring Ed, for example, that they were safe and would not fall off the precipice onto the rocks below. Ed was sexually excited, and the female being sensed my horniness. Although he was hazy as to how this came about, Ed said we had intercourse. According to Ed, this act was similar to human sexual intercourse, with fondling of the breasts, insertion of the penis in the vagina, and active participation by both individuals. Interestingly, although Ed was a virgin at this time, he did not recall this experience and still felt himself to be a virgin when he had sexual intercourse sometime later. After the sex, which Ed said was fulfilling and great, he sensed that the female wanted to get on with a bigger agenda. You take care of the immediate physical needs, and you get on to the lesson. Her attitude was, now we'll get down to business, like a teacher. You might settle your students by telling them a light story when they first come in the classroom. Just get them settled, focused, and then kind of lead them into... Then she started explaining things to me. Ed wanted to write things down so he could remember later, but she would not let him and just worked at my perception by awareness, sort of mind to mind. Sensing his frustration, she assured him, "You will remember when you need to know." In this interview, Ed's recall of the content of the information this female entity gave to him was sketchy, but he remembers that he felt dumbfounded, with my mouth hanging open. He had had a traditional Roman Catholic upbringing, attending parochial school until the 4th grade, and nothing he had been taught prepared him for messages of such spiritual or cosmic import. Ed feels that somehow the alien being opened his consciousness. She wired me into my emotions, and at some point early in the encounter, perhaps during the foreplay, interplay, orgasmic parts of it, like she sort of gains either a clinical judgment of my emotional mental typography, or gained my agreement to go on to part 2. She looked at me and said, "Well, do you think you can handle the next part?" Some of the information concerned the way humans are conducting themselves here in terms of international politics, our environment, our violence to each other, our food and all that. And she kept explaining that the laws of the universe are this way, and it's like, if you're driving on the wrong side of the road, what's going to happen inevitably? It's like here are the laws, and here's the way you humans conduct your affairs, and slam, bang, it's inevitable. Ed's father was a machinist by trade, working at a major firm in the New England region, and Ed's idea, inculcated in his flag-waving family, was that he would be a techie, go into electronics and help to beat the damn communists. We got to develop more, better technology to kill those damn commies before they kill us. Although the information was largely new to Ed, it somehow made sense to me. He had a scientific bent towards things, and she explained things in scientific logical terms, elucidating a series of interrelated concepts, that these are the laws of the universe, specifying in detail these concepts. And here, you geniuses on the planet doing this and that, and this is the way the thing should operate, and you're out of harmony, and at some point the sheets get balanced out, sooner or later. And I'm standing there, oh my God, it's like she gave me this safety mechanism of embedding it deep in my core. I just sat there like, oh my God, it was like trauma time. Deep, anxious concern over the path I could see us humans taking. A world trauma. Ed was told of the heavily destructive path we were taking, which was also destructive to the humanoid's planet. He feels that his whole psyche was permanently changed by this encounter. How do I put it? She said that with my acquiescence that I was, my emotions, my cognitions, my whole perceptions were going to be modified, and that my style of functioning would be slightly different. The closest analogy I can give is like changing some of the software architecture and some of the hardware in the computer. At first, when you sit down to work with it, you may not see it, but then you say, wait a minute. Now the software works differently, faster. It's got more capability. She also assured Ed that he would no longer be traumatized by negative alien visitations. She sensed in my mind an awareness about previous encounters with a negative type of alien and said, yes, 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 that's in the past now. They won't be around. They won't be able to mess with you anymore. She made reference to her own people, positive aliens, as a group that came from someplace else, and explained that the team that was with her served as her supporting staff. Subsequent to the encounter, Ed found himself making intuitive and somewhat impulsive statements on social, political, and scientific matters, and other kids would look at me and say, "Boy, is he weird." Although not especially accomplished in the conventional academic sense, Ed found that he had an instinctive appreciation of modern physics and modern chemistry, of such matters as Einsteinian relativity, micro and macro realities, the curvature of space, and the paradoxes in scientific laws. He also found he could talk of these things to other teenagers in his high school class so that they would say, "Yeah, that makes sense." These changes in Ed seemed to intrigue his teachers. Ed's intention had been to be a flag-waving super techie, but once in engineering school he found himself frozen emotionally and angry, frustrated, and despondent. After less than a semester at an engineering college, he transferred to a small liberal arts college where he tried to find out what makes civilization tick, trying to understand the nature and structure of human civilization. He became interested in the pageant of history, Rome, Greece, and all, and what he calls the bigger quest. Although Ed is aware of no further encounters, he senses now that his teenage experience lingered within him, and he sometimes has had brief flashbacks or glimpses of the cove or other geography where the experience took place. In his 20s and 30s, he became somewhat of a loner. He would be stirred by pictures of blonde women, and sometimes when bicycling, whenever I'd see a woman of a slight build with long blonde hair, I'd try to pedal up to see her, and he'd think, "Geez, is that her?" But he would be disappointed that it's not her. Both Ed and his wife Lynn have Nordic roots. They met at a cultural organization where both were studying Northern European literature and history. Lynn felt like I knew him already. In addition to their common interests in science and technology, nature and the outdoors, Lynn has blonde hair. After 5 years of spending time with each other, they were married in the late 1970s. The couple is childless, although they have been trying to have children. There have been a number of fertility problems, which may or may not be abduction-related, including 3 or 4 spontaneous terminations of Lynn's pregnancies. Lynn herself has had a missing time episode and other experiences that make her suspect that she has also had encounters. When I met Ed, he was having trouble finding his proper niche, was lost in the desert, and beating his head against the wall. Lynn believes that this may have contributed to their difficulty in having children. For we've been in sort of suspended animation, waiting for the light to go on. Ed has always felt especially close to nature, to woods, trees, and plants, and feels that he can talk to plants. He feels a desperate race with the earth, a need to put together the pieces of what he knows, like an erector set, and that he has been challenged to do this. He has practiced meditation and studied Eastern philosophy in his struggle to find his authentic path. He and Lynn both feel that Ed's time in the desert may have been worthwhile, and that out of all the things he has tried, he may find a way to integrate his ecological and spiritual commitments with his technological and scientific abilities. At the end of the first session, we discussed the fact that Ed's teenage experience occurred 2 months before the Betty and Barney Hill case that began the modern history of abduction experiences, and he expressed with some conflict a desire to gain access to further material, especially of the information that the female alien provided him in the capsule through hypnosis. After our initial meeting, Ed found himself becoming increasingly troubled, in the name of the future, about eco-instability and assaults upon the Earth. He increasingly longed for guidance as to what he might do and felt pressed to discover more of what was it she told me. He felt awed by a sense of responsibility, as I'm not like JFK's nephew or something. I have this intuitive feeling that what she told me is damn important. Important for my unfoldment. I'm afraid to even say for the Earth's unfoldment. I mean, I'm no messianic leader that thousands are going to follow. He was determined to go deeper into his experience from that night in Maine with the use of hypnosis, and a session was scheduled for October 8th, 11 weeks after our first interview. Before the regression, Ed and I went over in more detail the misty quality of that July night, the location of the Nash in relation to the sea, about 100 yards away on the other side of a road, the cabins where Bob's parents were staying, and the gently rocky nature of the coast where they were to spend the night, compared to the more rugged terrain and sweep of the coastal cove by the promontory where the pod was perched. I had him describe the car's fold-down seats and the two boys' bedtime preparations, which I went over in still more detail during the hypnosis session itself. As he talked of getting ready to go to sleep that night, he referred to nighttime fears from perhaps age 4, when he would wake up in terror, screaming for his parents, after having dreamed of going down a path into a field on some railroad tracks, and then the railroad tracks would disappear into some sort of starlit black night. During the period when he had this dream, he had deep anxiety about going to sleep at night and was afraid to be in his room by himself in the dark. After the induction of the hypnotic relaxation, I explored further details of the boys' bedtime preparations with Ed. He described Mrs. Baxter's motherly fussing over the boys' warmth and comfort, and remembered that he slept in a sleeping bag while Bob slept with blankets. He again recalled his and Bob's talk of girls. We're still virgins. He remembered the sound of cars going by on the road, the fog shrouding in, and that he felt a little uncomfortable deep inside of me about problems or something, I don't know. As Ed described drifting off, going into my thoughts, he felt some tingling in the area of the base of his head or upper neck, and then found himself getting frightened. The tingling sensations increased, and Ed said, I sense something around the car. He thinks he had been asleep, but is not sure, dreaming perhaps of getting it on with a nice teenage girl from one of the area beaches. But then he saw 1 or 2 figures through the car windows, a couple of human sort of things. But cripes, their eyes are big. You know, they're not spiders, and I don't think I'm dreaming. The figures don't look like normal humans. They had big black-grey or black eyes and intense, small mouths, some sort of ear-like thing. In this fog, I can't quite make out what you guys look like. You guys are clever. You know how to use camouflage. The beings were of a slightly different type than he had seen before. Ed's fear mounted in the session, and he recalled feeling just mortified, like somebody's ready to jump me and I'm gonna fucking fight for my goddamn life. As the tingling sensation at the base of the skull continued, Ed felt himself drifting out of the car. He made a growling sound as his anger came back, but then felt relaxed and even happy, which puzzled him. 2 or 3 of the beings were looking at me, and Ed experienced a sensation of floating, and my whole body is starting to float. I'm floating, I'm floating, I'm floating. Why am I floating? At this point in the session, Ed felt confused and tried to keep control of what's going on. I encouraged him to stay with his actual experience. He then saw a grey fog around him, the tingling sensation going further into all parts of my skull, and he was vaguely aware of scenery changing. This is certainly many steps beyond the TV program One Step Beyond, Ed noted. I keep trying to control it, but I'm trying to not control it. My mind doesn't want to go and get back there. Then he said, I'm sort of like zapping through all this cellular atomic type structure, and I'm just penetrating through it. I just penetrate. It just keeps coming and coming and coming. Then Ed felt himself going down this time tunnel and literally traveling with no reference point. I'm aware of some process of transport. I'm aware of some movement of some sort. He continued fighting. The rules of the street are you fight like hell. But realized that the rules by which he operates did not apply, and they're overriding me somehow or other, so that I have no choice but to let it happen, and it did happen. Next, Ed felt himself to be very stiff, and out someplace along the shoreline, floating someplace. He recalled hearing the surf pounding and became more perplexed about the fact that he was moving above the water somewhere along the coast with no visible means of propulsion, although he did have a funny feeling that they're around me someplace. He felt that the beings were very gentle without mental intimidation or harshness to their physical treatment of me. But definitely, we are in control, thank you. Ed had the sense that he was moving about as fast as a car, perhaps 50 or 60 miles per hour, and could make out houses and streetlights, maybe a car here and there, a porch light, maybe a TV below him. He was embarrassed at the thought that someone might see him. Geez, if anybody looks up and sees some guy in his pajamas floating along, cripes. I might be embarrassed, geez, if my mother ever heard about it. She'd chew me out. Jesus Christ. Proprieties and everything. Ed found this material so extraordinary that he wondered out loud, am I bullshitting you? I don't know. Are you? I asked. No, he said, because this keeps coming back, and I sense, the sincerity of myself says it's not coming from I'm just making this up. But it doesn't fit what's supposed to happen. This is what you submit to a script to Twilight Zone. It doesn't fit anything I would have seen on the tube or at the theater. Ed found that he was approaching this outcrop of land and the surf and all that, and I'm seeing some sort of luminescent dome-like pod. Then I'm being dragged in a sense that I have no control over my body, towards the bottom. Somewhere on the bottom I feel like I'm coming through, and I don't know how we got through the bottom, but here I am. This was evidently physically possible because the craft seemed to be just suspended there, protruding beyond the rocky outcropping. Parts of it are near the rock, and other parts of it are they're kind of just over the rock. Inside the vehicle, Ed noted a bluish-silver glowing light. He felt his vision was being limited, and he was angry. I hate being in this position of no control. I hate this. I hate this, damn it. I hate this. So stupid, so goddamn stupid, for Christ's sakes. How will I explain this to anybody? He had a pain in the front of his head and was confused, disoriented mentally and physically. My wallet's in the house. I have no ID with me. He also had an erection, which embarrassed him. This is not part of my upbringing. There were at least half a dozen beings in the room, which he called an amphitheater, and sort of like a surgery theater, or an OR. And there's these white lights around. One of the beings seemed to be the head doctor in charge. This one gives off all the vibrations of being a female. The others he called drones, or staff people, just milling around doing whatever. The female being had long silvery hair with large black eyes without pupils or irises. She was looking at Ed with those loving, big, sensuous eyes, and they exude a loving sexuality. like she's a very wise, mature woman conveying telepathically to me, "I have control of the situation." She was wearing a dress-like long smock, open at the neck that covered her arms and shoulders. He noted that she has breasts. Maybe there's some sort of a pendant or medallion thing around, dangling from her neck on some sort of a chain or pin, can't quite make out. The female being thinks his name to him, and Ed asked, "How do you know me?" observing, "You look very sexy." Although she was staring at Ed, she looks right into me. He felt she was not letting him look at her. He seemed to be trying to bring forth a sound from his throat, but it won't come. And he re-experienced the sense of being totally shut down that he had felt originally. He found himself sinking into a grey fog, as if enshrouded. The being told Ed, "You're okay. Don't fight it. Don't fight it." She knew his fear and was reading my mind like an open book. She said, "I know what happened to you when you were younger," and assured Ed that these things will not happen again. His fear diminished and he said, "Somehow or other, you're doing a great job of convincing me that you're here for my well-being. I'm not just your laboratory rat guinea pig," as he had felt in the past. Ed recalled that he experienced some sort of forced arousal. "She's filling my mind with all sorts of erotic escapades. She's just raising somehow or other. She's just giving me a hard-on." The female being knew that Ed wanted to have sex with her. "She reads my mind like a book. She can just thumb through the pages at her will." But with a mirthful expression, she told him something like, "Yeah, you'd like that, wouldn't you? But that's not the way it's going to be." Instead, she explained that they needed his sperm for their needs, to create special babies, and for work we're doing to help the people on your planet. Ed continued to struggle with his helplessness and lack of control, but was somewhat mollified and persuaded that he was being used for something worthwhile. Some sort of tube or container was placed over Ed's penis, and he felt very relaxed now. He experienced a rubbing sensation or friction which built in intensity. "It's a very smooth hand-like thing. I want to believe it's her hand." After he ejaculated, the female being thinks it to me, "That was good, that was great," in appreciation that they got a good sample. He then felt hot and sweaty. This completed the first part of the experience. Although Ed felt, "At first they manipulated me to put me in the position where they could tell him what they wanted," he soon felt, "Okay, you convinced me that what you did was for some greater good that I don't fully understand." Of the female alien, he said, "There's something very trusting about you, loving, caring, wanting to help." Then he added in some awe, "I've never been through anything like this in my life." At this point, the scene changed, and Ed felt as if, "I'm in a different space." Before was more like an OR, but now, all of a sudden, he was in the pod with translucent walls that he had remembered consciously before the hypnosis. He did not recall how I got from there to here. The female entity wants to talk to me, and Ed felt scared about what was coming next. A seriousness comes over me. It's like when the doctor or the teacher comes in and says, "Now the heavies. Now the serious part. Now we think we can tell you things." He noticed that the female being, the spokesperson, was wearing a silvery, somewhat metallic tunic. It's sort of a weave, woven knit sort of thing, with some sort of shimmery stuff on it, and I can see her exquisite breasts jutting from beneath it. She had a gentle grin and was looking at me very lovingly. Ed felt that the inside of his head and his eyes were burning and spinning as she began to talk to him, and he was shown different things. The remaining 40 to 45 minutes of our hypnosis regression was taken up with Ed's recollection of the information he received during the abduction. The sequence of our dialogue may not reproduce altogether accurately the order in which these thoughts and images came to him at that time. The narrative was filled with apocalyptic images. The being communicated to him telepathically in what Ed calls allegorical terms, a message of instability on your planet, eco-spiritual emotional instability. Volcanic eruptions are a sign. It's allegorical towering plumes of eruptive rage, not ejaculations of ecstasy, but eruptions of anguish. Be careful, pounding waves of eruption, watering, rushing, and engulfing about and around you. Ed protested, "Why do you talk to me in allegory? I'm no poet." But the relentless communication continues. Towering, pounding surf, shifting plates, instability, earth shuddering in anguish, crying, weeping at the stupidity of humans losing contact with the inner soul of their being. She said to him, "You have a chance, Ed. You have an inner sensitivity." Again he protested, "But the teachers always pound me for my grammar and spelling." But she insisted, "You have a sensitivity, Ed. You pick up on things. You can talk to the earth. The earth talks to you." He affirmed to me that indeed, as a small boy, he would struggle with his mother because he loved to go into the woods, for which she would sometimes punish him by making him go to bed without supper or spanking him. "Things talk to me," he said. "The animals, the spirits. I can sense the earth. I can sense the interplay of nature." The battle with his mother continued. "Only bad boys go in the woods," she would say. But Ed was undeterred. The female being, whose name he now recalled as something like Ogika or Agika, picked up on these qualities and underscored the responsibility Ed has for his gifts and powers. Listen to the earth, Ed. You can hear the earth. You can hear the anguish of the spirits. You can hear the wailing cries of the imbalances. It will save you. It will save you. Things are going to happen, she said, but he must listen to the spirits, even if he is taunted, and not feel overwhelmed. She gave me a flash. She opened up that channel and turned up the volume. Some of the spirits are crying. Some of them are mirthful. She just ran me through the whole thing in a couple of seconds. All this you can see, hear, and feel. Other people may think you are crazy. The earth itself, the being told him, is enraged at our stupidity, and the earth's skin is going to swat some bugs off that do not know how to work in symbiotic harmony with it. I asked Ed how this swatting off was going to happen. Convulsions of the earth, he said, almost like puking us off, or shunning us off. They will get rid of parts of us. Meanwhile, the being kept telling Ed that he has a greater agenda and must listen to the music of nature, the exquisite sounds of nature. The music will make sense to you, and it will leave a harmony with your emotions, your intuitions, your hunches. You have a gift with hunches, intuitions, and emotions. Ed, imbued with the doctrine of his hierarchical Roman Catholic upbringing, in which God talks with the Pope, and the Pope talks to the priests, who then talk to my mother, my father, reacted cynically. "Yeah, I'm going to open up a tea leaf parlor, put a turban on my head, $10 a pop." But the being cut through his sarcasm and insisted that he own up to the gifts he was born with. At this point he reported that he actually saw the spirits in the form of mirthful little playful creatures just bounding around. I asked him to describe them. They're like energy forms, of many different kinds. There are many different shapes, colors. He giggled at this point. He found hilarious the contortions and mirthful things that they can do. I asked for an example. They can float around, he said, and change the laws of nature, by which he seemed to mean they can change shape and form. One of the spirits is talking to me. He had long, silvery hair and an oversized head, and is only a foot or two tall, like a micro-midget. The spirit said, "Well, see, I put myself like this, so you could sort of look at me and relate to me. But I don't have to be like this if I don't want to be like this, and I can change myself into a multitude of forms. I put myself into this semi-humorous shape so that you would feel comfortable and mirthful with me. Because I know certain other types of creatures you're afraid of, like spiders in particular, and snakes, so I'll make myself like this." Then Ed said he realized that in some sense he and other human beings also have the power to change the laws of nature if I access certain parts of my being, which frightened him. I asked what scared him. "Well, Jesus, if I blow it and use this power at the wrong point—" "You are right, Ed. You are right, Ed," the female being told him. He continued with her words, "You've got to learn how to use this, when to use this, where to use this, or else they will take you away. And they will label you, and they will put you away, away, away. And they will tell your parents, 'Poor Ed, he had such promise but something happened. And Mrs. M, his mother, we're terribly sorry. She's running this in my mind.' The authority figures will have to put him away." The being spoke to him further about the task of cultivating his mind, warning, for example, about pursuing science in an orthodox academic setting and fashion at the expense of his intuitive skills. The process of cultivating your mind in the traditional rational way will obliterate these other things, and you have seen all the infinite possibilities, she said. I asked Ed to say more about what he was told or shown about these possibilities. He spoke of seeing how the laws of the universe are made, and something about the point where the universe comes into birth. Again, she warned him about misusing his understanding. "You see the ambush of the planet now," she said. At this moment in the session, Ed felt blocked from seeing further. I asked him what he saw of the universe being born. Ed, an incredibly blinding, searing white light. JM, she showed you that? Ed, yes. JM, what was that like for you? Ed, almost too much, but it was like, holy shit. There's a particular chord or passage in Mahler's 10th Symphony. Goes like, it just opens up, and there it is. It's like a galaxy being born. It really is, really is, really is this. But she says, I don't want you to see too much of it. You have to know. You must be wise in how you talk about this, and when and where you talk about this. There are those that will use your mind for asinine purposes. I took him back to the glimpses he had of the anguish of the spirits. In addition to the innocent play with nature, the way we're supposed to be, Ed remembered seeing distorted forms of entities, of spirits out here now, because man has done so much damage, hurt and damage both to himself and to each other, and to Mother Nature. He was shown grotesque forms, horrific. There's dark, grey, malignant forms that they were trying to heal or rebalance. It took a lot of effort of the healthy spirits to keep these malignant forms from growing in magnitude and malignancy. The female entity continued, you are distorting, growing greater malignancy, trying to get yourself. We're trying to keep them under control and bring back into play. You see how malignant and deformed they are, Ed. They're grey, they're horrific, distorted masses. You see how these energy forms, Ed, are so nice and mirthful, and they look so healthy, and then there are these others over here. Ed spoke further of the communication he received about the consequences of our pillaging on the planet. The malignant, destructive forms were created by the imbalance of the collective human psyche. Dark grey things that just come along and suck up and destroy anything. They just go berserk, and they just zap anything in their path, in their range. The ultimate result would be that they run their course, he said, until they work out all this negative energy and return to normal, happy state. They've got to work it out of their system, like getting the pus out of your wound. It won't heal until you get the pus out of it. I asked him what might be called for. He answered in terms of what he has been told about his own survival in the face of the cataclysmic earth changes that are to come. She's telling me, showing me that I have the tools within me to survive. I have this extra dimension. I have the choice of listening to it or not. I am to listen to my inner, something deep inside myself, and listen to the earth. Ed's partner, Lynn, he realized, has known intuitively what the being has told him. and it doesn't faze her in the least. His and Lynn's task would be to teach those human beings who will listen. There are those who will listen before it happens and prepare themselves. I asked if he was given any information about whether it was still possible to prevent the cataclysm. No, he said, there are not enough. Too few will listen, but those who will listen and can work with the laws of nature will survive to teach others on the other side, who then will listen and say, "Oh geez, we were screwed up back then." I expressed my lack of clarity as to whether he meant cataclysm in a literal, physical, or metaphoric sense. He said there would be a series of geological and meteorological convulsions. Finding this all rather depressing, I asked how this information about spirits would help him or anyone else survive. Undeterred, he said that the spirits of the earth will make safe havens for those who will survive. I wondered what was the use if everything was going to be destroyed. He said that it was more a reconstitution, not just destruction, a rebalancing, and repeated that humans have to learn how to work on this planet with the laws of nature and not plunder the earth, to use the raw materials in the way they should be used. Then the earth will rebalance itself. I remained confused about the literalness of all this and of the various distinctions at work between spiritual and physical catastrophe. Ed had some difficulty understanding my confusion and said, "A person has to spiritually rebalance themselves. I have to balance myself out spiritually to hear these messages. When I hear these messages, I will know on a physical level where to go to work, those spots on the earth which will still be sacred and accessible." At this juncture, we were both becoming somewhat tired and agreed to end the session. After I brought him out of the regression, Ed observed that this information has always been before my eyes, as if on a page, but that he had looked right by it. She had it there for me all the time, but I was afraid to look at it. Ed felt awed by what he had told me and spoke of the responsibility of translating his access into their dimension, his knowledge and concern for the imminent breakdown of planetary systems into usable terms for the larger society. He experiences himself as a Joe average person with extraordinary information. It's like trying to be Superman and Clark Kent. You can't go walking around in your cape and tights all the time. You have to be a kind of Clark Kent. Love is the key, Ed said. Love and compassion for the earth or the beings on the earth, be they corporeal or incorporeal. Not love in the mush and gush sense, but there is a deeper sense of love. Both Ed and Lynn understand now why the female being put the dampers on his remembering and talking about his experience. If I had come back and started talking about his knowledge of the laws of nature, he might have been whisked off to make the bomb of the millennium. He still faces the dilemma of how to be effective. Who's going to listen to a mild-mannered technician? Ed did not experience his encounter and the recovery of memories related to it as markedly disturbing. I don't find what happened to me traumatic. Like in the case of the other people in the encounter group, he had attended my support group for other abductees a few weeks before who were used like laboratory rats. Instead, he felt as if a great cloud, a shroud, has been pulled away from my awareness that has been sort of just there. We talked further together about how, as Lynn put it, to responsibly take action. One step that we could agree on was the value of his talking with other experiencers in order to share information and to build the affinities of their growing community. Discussion. Although it is not uncommon for an experiencer to recall a single major encounter, it is interesting that Ed's occurred when he was a teenager and was not recalled for nearly 30 years. The forces involved in the implanting, storage, and recovery of information remain among the central mysteries of the whole abduction phenomenon. As we have seen, Ed's teenage abduction experience seemed to have worked subtly in his psyche throughout his life, making him somehow different, perhaps more intuitive or aligned with nature than his contemporaries. Yet we do not know what is cause and effect. Whether his openness itself may have predisposed him to being chosen for abduction experiences, whatever that may mean. We also do not understand completely why it should suddenly happen that the material from the earlier experience returned. Yet it does appear that as a mature man, he is in a better position to apply his knowledge in some sort of earthly calling, integrating the abduction-related information with his psychological gifts and professional expertise. It is not yet clear how he, with Lynn, might do this. The reported forced taking of sperm for some sort of poorly understood interspecies breeding program is characteristic of male abduction experiences. Information about ecological disaster with powerful apocalyptic imagery is also commonly described as being transmitted by the aliens to human subjects. What is somewhat unusual in Ed's case is the extent of the detail he was given in a single abduction experience, and the fact that he originally received this information in the summer of 1961, 2 months before the Barney and Betty Hill abduction experience in September of that year. Much of what Ed was told or shown about the breakdown of planetary life systems and human violation of nature's laws is well known, at least within the environmental movement. A well-researched book like Donella Meadows' Beyond the Limits of Growth, Meadows 1992, makes clear the consequences, if not the causes, of our continuing destruction of the Earth's environment. What is of particular interest is the power of the information for someone like Ed. His learning was not simply intellectual. The realities he experienced being transmitted to him by the female alien of impending ecological and spiritual disaster as the result of human disharmony with nature were felt deeply in every part of his being. As he said himself, his whole self, his entire perception, was changed by the encounter. It is not clear how literally to regard the apocalyptic visions Ed has reported receiving. They have the quality of prophetic tradition, warning of disaster, and of the need for fundamental change. Whether they are concretely predictive or calls for change and action cannot, of course, be answered. That Ed has taken the information seriously enough to change his life and commit himself to communicating what he has learned to others who will listen is certain. Ed's report of direct encounters during the abduction experience with shape-shifting spirits that have actual form is interesting, as is the actualization of negative emotional forces in the shape of malignant or demonic spirits. The Western worldview has no place for such entities, tending to regard them as the products of fantasy or the projections of the psyche, although they are believed in or their existence acknowledged by other cultures throughout the world. For example, in a meeting in India in April 1992, in which I participated with a small group of professionals who were invited to discuss the abduction phenomenon with Tibetan leaders, the lamas saw the reported alien beings as spirits that have become upset by the invasion and destruction of the Earth's environment, which they inhabit as well. A Tibetan physician explained that as a result of our ignorance, material attachment and aggression, manifested by the desecration of the planet, these spirits have become annoyed and irritated and are causing negative disturbances. A leading spiritual figure among the Tibetans also saw the reported aliens as spirits that have become so troubled by human destruction of the realms they inhabit that they have been forced to come among us, seeking our compassion and transformation. A final word needs to be said about the use of hypnosis in Ed's case. Before my first meeting with him, Ed had recalled a great deal about his teenage abduction experience, but his conscious memory before the regression tended to simplify the experience and, more significantly, to gloss the narrative in ways that were more syntonic with the self-image and desires of a young adolescent than what he recalled painfully during the hypnosis session. Many embarrassing details relating to powerlessness and loss of control were not available to him except under hypnosis. In particular, the happy outcome of pleasurable sexual intercourse with the cooperative, sexually active female alien gave way to the forced, quite humiliating, taking of a sperm sample as the being watched approvingly. This second scenario, which is obviously more disturbing, is far more typical of male abduction experiences, and therefore more believable. All this suggests that, at least in Ed's case, the information recalled painstakingly under hypnosis is more reliable than the consciously recalled story, which seems to have been unconsciously adjusted to be compatible with Ed's wishes and self-esteem. There are other details obtained during the hypnosis session relating to the transport to the craft, the numbers of beings, the female leader and her staff, rather than the single alien woman. The 2 chambers and OR. Like room and the pod-like briefing room, rather than the single pod, and the great amount of information transmitted by the alien female, which make the story obtained during the regression more believable, or at least more consistent, with other abduction accounts. 4. Personally, I don't believe in UFOs. Sheila N. was a 44-year-old social worker when she was encouraged,